Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you have a unique experience you'd like to share as a guest. Podmatch helps you connect with guests and hosts who have similar interests, experiences, and goals, making sure that each connection is meaningful and impactful. Thanks to Podmatch, I've connected with parents and caregivers worldwide and supported them in sharing their stories on Quiet Connection. If you'd like to check them out, visit www.joinpodmatch.com/Quiet Connection Podcast and learn more. Welcome to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma around postpartum mental health. I'm Chelsea. In this week's episode, Amy shares her experiences as a naturopathic doctor, as well as her personal journey with infertility, pregnancy loss, and an MTHFR polymorphism genetic variant. She talks about the emotional aspects of pregnancy loss, the significance of support systems, and the power of community. Amy is committed to spreading awareness about MTHFR and genetic variants like it so that others may gain a better understanding of their own possible struggles. Here's Amy. Hello. Today I'm here with Amy. Amy, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thanks so much, Chelsea. How are you?
Excellent. Excellent. Oh my gosh. I wish I could say excellent. I love that energy. I'm okay. I'm all right. It's Monday. You know, it's Monday. It's a Monday mood.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah. Just got not just, but got the kids out the door, off to school, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna do the thing. Amy, I would love it if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are now, as well as who you were before you were a parent.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, those are two separate people. So I am a naturopathic doctor. And prior to being a parent, I did that full time, and I was very career focused, and, that was really my life, honestly. Like, I was very, very focused on career and social and whatever. And I kind of grew up late, I have to say. I really enjoyed, being focused on my career and being able to really, put my brain in that direction. And it wasn't really until my mid-30s that I was like, maybe I'd like to, I don't know, have a partner, have a kid. Yeah.
All those things they tell us we're supposed to do.
All those things. Yeah. Well, honestly, it had not been on my radar prior to that. Not that I wasn't in relationships and things like that. Of course I was, but it just wasn't my focus, right? I was very, very much focused on, achievement and whatever. And then I feel like when it did sort of become my focus, which was maybe my mid-30s, I sort of poked my head out of the sand and I was like, oh, okay, well, this is not looking good.
Oh, no.
It's the truth. I mean, dating for dating is a different deal than looking for a person that you can actually spend your life with, right? And that's a whole different ballgame. And then I met my husband, and he's hilarious. It was a long distance relationship in the beginning, which both of us said we would never have, of course. Never say never.
Yeah.
But we just, we hit it off so beautifully that the distance didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And it ended up being kind of a whirlwind. I'm pretty sure we got pregnant the night we got engaged, which...
Wow.
I know. Which is very unexpected. And that pregnancy went incredibly well, especially given that we are both older. He was in his 40s at that point, and I was 37, and obviously, I'm in medicine. I know how badly pregnancies can go, when you get to a certain age, and I have a lot of risk factors for bad pregnancies anyway. I have an MTHFR polymorphism, and, my mom was technically infertile. She was diagnosed as infertile before she had me. I was kind of the miracle baby, and, I was the smallest baby to ever survive in the hospital when they, at that time period. This was, of course, in the 70s.
Wow.
And so, like my family fertility history is not great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that pregnancy honestly went like it was blessed. We didn't have pregnancy complications. They were worried about gestational diabetes, and so they were monitoring that, but it never actually emerged. But then after the delivery, then we got into trouble with postnatal preeclampsia, which was a bit of a mess, but we all got through it, right? My
Yeah.
daughter was healthy. That was really the thing that mattered. So that was excellent. It wasn't really until we started trying for a sibling that we figured out how actually dire our fertility situation was.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy amazing that, isn't it weird sometimes in life that it's just like it just happens for some people.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I wasn't planning on that. Like, I didn't think it was going to be that easy. But then you got two sides of the coin.
Right.
Like the first time it was super easy. And then, yeah, I want to like take us back. Could you explain what MTHFR is for listeners who may be unfamiliar?
Yeah, it's a strange sort of thing that's surprisingly common. So roughly 50% of the US population has an issue with an MTHFR genetic variant. And so this is the gene that basically codes for the enzyme that activates folate. And I mean, I'm sure, you've talked about folate probably a million times. But
you know what? I haven't. I
really?
mean, in my personal life, I have, but not on the
Right.
podcast.
Well, so folate is one of those nutrients that nobody really thinks about it until they're thinking about fertility. And then it's all anybody ever talks about.
Yeah.
So folate, if you don't get enough folate, then cells can't divide properly and your genetics can't replicate themselves properly. And so folate deficiencies can lead to things like spina bifida, neural tube defects, anencephaly, all of the whole range of neural tube defects, which are obviously life-threatening to the infants that have them. And it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But also folate deficiencies lead to repeat miscarriages, spontaneous abortion, that sort of thing, pregnancy complications. I mean, there's all sorts of things. And the MTHFR polymorphism is basically a difference in the way we process and activate folate. And if you have this gene difference, then you don't activate folate very effectively. And we have kind of the double whammy where folic acid blocks up our receptors. So the synthetic form of folate, which is what a lot of us get in our vitamins, in our prenatals, in food fortification programs, it actually blocks the receptors so that it makes this problem worse. So even if you're taking the folate that you're supposed to be taking, a lot of times it's actually harming rather than helping.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the other bummer is that roughly 50% of the population has this and doesn't know it. It's one of the leading causes of male infertility, and it's underdiagnosed. I mean, severely underdiagnosed. Most men, and this isn't on the radar anywhere.
Yeah.
And in female infertility, it's only ever tested if you have repeat late-term miscarriages.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's kind of one of those unsung problems that nobody really talks about.
I had never heard of it before I stumbled on your story. And like you said, like folate and stuff like that, like it's things that you hear a lot about in pregnancy. It's in your prenatal vitamins and
Exactly.
But I had never heard of and I keep looking at my notes because I don't want to miss. I'm so bad at acronyms. I don't want to put the letters in the wrong order. But like, I had never heard of the MTHFR polymorphism before.
I know. It's a weird one. And it doesn't get a lot of conventional media coverage, right? There's lots of people on social media talking about it, but it's all this, anecdotal, exactly like this, right? My story is this. Yeah. And so, it's important to the people who experience it, but to medicine at large, it really hasn't become important yet, which is kind of ironic because it's tied into almost everything, right? Infertility, especially.
Yeah.
But also, neurotransmitter health, inflammatory health, cardiac health, right? It increases your risk for things like stroke, all sorts of things. So it's a big deal that nobody's really talking about yet. And especially when roughly 50% of the US population has some variant. So that's a lot, right?
It is a lot. It's a lot. And like, this is the way my brain works, I guess, on a Monday morning. But like, the more people that I meet with and the different types of like syndromes and deficiencies and things that I'm learning about, I feel like as kids, like when we go, how everyone's always interested in like their pet's genealogy and they want to find out this, that, and that. Like, shouldn't we just get like a full blood work panel when we're young and be like, okay, so you have these things, just so you have a heads up, so that like later in life, especially when you're getting into like wanting to start a family, you're not slammed with, oh yeah, by the way, now that you've gone through X amount of losses or X amount of years not being able to get pregnant, oh yeah, just so you know, this is something that you have. Like, it's a little bit baffling to me.
That's exactly it.
Is it something you had even known about before being diagnosed with it?
So I actually, as things happen in medicine, I found out about it the first time from a patient who was experiencing late-term pregnancy losses. And so she had 3 subsequent pregnancies that she had lost in either the second or third trimester, which is obviously just heartbreaking and terrible. And she was one of those people that, you just wanted her to succeed so badly. Like, I knew she would be just an excellent mom. Like, she was that person, right? She made everybody smile around her. She made everybody happy. Even when her heart was breaking, she was just one of those people that was so full of light. You just wanted her to have a baby, right?
Yeah.
And so when the third loss happened, they did genetic testing on the fetus, and that came back showing, several things. But one of them was this MTHFR. And I remember her coming into my office, just, brokenhearted, and dropping this pile of paperwork in my lap and being like, this is what they found. I don't understand. Please help. Right. And so I started digging into it. And this, I was in family practice. I wasn't in fertility medicine. It wasn't my area of specialty. And so for me, it was kind of a research project, right? Like, dig into this, see what I can find, whatever. And there were lots of things that were small factors, but nothing really big, except this MTHFR thing. And the more I started researching it, several things happened. One was, I was reading it and I was like, ooh, that's me. Ooh, that's me. Okay, well, that's me too, right? So you start being like, okay, well, thank you, universe, for dropping this in my lap, because obviously there's a message here. But then also, when you start putting together the pieces of this puzzle, and this was back probably around 2000, and there wasn't a ton of research at that point, right? Like, there wasn't the public. Like, even now, if you look on social media, if you look on the internet, you can find things. At that point, it wasn't really like that. I was digging through medical journals and that sort of thing. It became really clear that this is a giant piece of the puzzle for a lot of people. And, probably 80% of my patient population at that point, I was like, okay, well, this is happening for a lot of people, right? These are the problems that I'm seeing every day, because what came into my office was always anxiety, insomnia, depression triad, right? Which is strongly linked to MTHFR, and women's hormone stuff, strongly linked to MTHFR, especially when there's complex multi-endocrine issues, right? So like metabolic issues along with hormone stuff, or, blood sugar instability along with estrogen dominance or whatever. So this was like my patient population, right?
Yeah.
So from there, it just kind of became a passion project. And obviously I did my own genetics with 23andMe, just a consumer service, not a medical test, but a consumer service. And from there, downloaded the raw data and, figured out how to extract the MTHFR thing, which there's a great service called Genetic Genie that has an methylation panel. Love it, love it. But if you upload your raw data to them and do the methylation panel, then they give you MTHFR, but also some related gene SNPs that are helpful if you start kind of diving into this.
Yeah.
And from there, it just became this process of working with clients. And in the beginning, it was all experimentation, right? Like, here's this thing. I'm not sure entirely what to do with it because that research doesn't exist. So here we go, right? We're going to go in a process. I am happy to report that that patient ended up having a family successfully. She did have babies successfully. It was certainly a process of trial and error for her and her husband. Actually, her husband also had an MTHFR issue that we didn't know about. So we treated them both. And basically it was a process of, eliminating all of the folic acid, finding MTHFR safe folates that they could use and process and activate, finding, prenatal vitamins that didn't have the folic acid that had an MTHFR safe form. And then also working to support other problems that might happen. Like with MTHFR, there's an association with microclotting that's, really linked to pregnancy loss because those tiny little clots basically prevent enough circulation from happening to the fetus that there's early term losses in that situation. And so, it became this big journey of like, what's the right dose of fish oil for these folks? What's the right folate? How do you change their diet to allow this to happen, right?
Yeah, and like as you said, it's along this road you're discovering that you check a lot of those boxes. What is that doing in that moment? Like what are you thinking? Like are you thinking like, "Oh my gosh, this explains so much," or are you thinking like I don't know. What were you thinking?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, part of the reason that I went into medicine, obviously I want to help people. I want to, make this world a little bit better in whatever way I can. But I also, I had been one of those kids that always had kind of inexplicable pain, right? Like soft tissue pain and structural pain. And it never made sense to everybody. It didn't fit in a diagnosis. It was just this really weird phenomena. And part of why I went into medicine was to see if I could figure out some of what that was, right?
Yeah.
Like what's actually happening here. And I feel like the MTHFR thing actually has helped me to figure out a chunk of it. And I still do have some pain, but it went from like a 5 to 6 every day to like a 1 to 2, right? Which is a whole different world. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, I feel like when I was reading this, I was like, okay, this is me. And also this is some answers, right? Like this is finally something that starts to make sense and starts to give me an indication of why I have symptoms that don't make any sense, that are not explicable, right? Because it's not actually a disease. It's just a variant in the way I process a vitamin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in anything in life, especially when it comes to our health, having a name or having is so validating, and also it helps you be able to take that next step to be like, okay, what's next? What do I do next?
Gives you a direction to explore, which is amazing, right? Because outside of having a name, you're sort of directionless.
Exactly. Do you suspect that your mother likely had the same gene deficiency, or?
Yeah, I'm 100% sure she does. So she had been diagnosed with endometriosis, and it's funny. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, but like we learn about our menses from our relatives, right? Like from our mothers and aunts and things like that. And so whatever's normal in that genetic line is sort of your normal. That's your baseline for what a normal period looks like. And so my baseline for a normal period was that mom would hemorrhage every month and have to go to the hospital for transfusion, right? Like,
yeah.
Turns out that's not normal.
No.
Medically, not normal.
If that's happening, please see your doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is a problem. This is an issue. But yeah, I mean, you can really see it through that family line. And that was part of what really started red flagging me with MTHFR is just that, through my family, there's this strong vein of like anxiety, strong vein of insomnia, and also strong vein of estrogen dominant hormone issues, right? Yeah. With fertility trouble and the whole shebang, right? And it's on both sides of my family. So
oh, great.
We got it coming and going. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's fun. So
I say that so often. I feel like you have to with stuff like this. That's fun.
well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it is what it is, right? And everybody in
Yeah.
life has their challenges, but it really does help when you can say, okay, wait, I sort of understand some of these challenges. And not only that, I can give this information to my daughter, who will certainly have some of these challenges. Like, that's the biggest thing, right? This is genetic. Sorry, honey. You're related to all
Yeah.
of us. So here's what we know, right? Here's how to actually take care of your body in a way that suits your genes. It's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly powerful. And my brain has gone in so many different directions, but in the vein of like talking about your daughter and that she may experience this, one, since you have sort of discovered this about yourself and your family, she's already starting off at a point that you guys at an advantage that you guys didn't have.
Yes, for sure.
You were left without answers, and she is coming from a place, if she chooses to have children one day, or if she's experiencing any of these other symptoms, she can be like, oh yeah, by the way, and she can talk to her doctor and be like, this is whatever. So that's amazing. That's just amazing in and of itself. I'm curious though, a couple of things. So you had sort of alluded when you were talking to like before becoming a parent, like settling down and stuff. It sounds like it wasn't like priority number one for you.
No.
Like, no.
It was priority number 800, honestly.
Yeah. So when you did make that shift to decide, like, okay, like, I do want to start a family, I do want to settle down. And thankfully, you miraculously had a wonderful first pregnancy.
Yes.
When it started to become difficult and you weren't really understanding why to have number two, like, what did that sort of do to your psyche, or like, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I was very conflicted the whole time. Like, there was a lot of time pressure, partly because I was an older parent, right? And partly because we really wanted a sibling to be close to Sabrina in age so that they would be closer, hopefully, right? We wanted them to be, able to play together and able to understand each other and to grow up together and blah, blah, blah. And so, there was all of this pressure to really, do the thing right then, get everything going.
Get it done.
Exactly. Exactly. And that definitely made the first couple of losses much harder, especially too, it was really important to my husband. He has a very big family. Like, he's one of 7 siblings. And so for him, if you're having a family, you have a big family, right? Like, you don't stop at one. That's crazy talk.
Go big or go home.
That's right. That's right. And so, we definitely, we were trying, and, I'm sure many listeners can relate to the trying soon after a pregnancy being just exhausting and like the least sexy thing in the world, right? Like, there's just nothing sexy about sex for a goal.
Yeah, absolutely not. I know. Yes, I know that story all too well.
Yes.
Like, oh, my app said. I mean, you didn't have this advantage at the time, but it's like, honey, my app says we have to do it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Today, right now. Where are you?
Yeah,
Get home.
Yeah, exactly. Can you come home? Because, no, not sexy at all. So I feel
it's
that.
not. It's not, and it's and also I have to say, after the postnatal preeclampsia and just having my baby older, I was kind of exhausted, right? I was just wrung out and drained. And the whole thing was, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. And my husband, he's a pilot. So a lot of it was single parenting for me, just by virtue of the nature of his work, right? He was away a lot. And that got in the way too, right? Lots of times he was away in my fertile window. And so those months that he was home were just like...
Go, go, go.
Exactly. Everybody, battle stations right now. So, it just, it was a strange time.
Yeah.
But then the further we got away from sort of that ideal time period when we were really trying to have a baby, the more conversations we were having about, like, wait a minute, okay, what are we doing to ourselves right now, right? Like, is this good for our marriage? Is it good for Sabrina? Is it our daughter? Is it good for us as a family? Like, is this adding things to our lives, or is it taking away from? And at that point, I felt also that a lot of the problem was really truly down to age. And I'm not, I didn't necessarily want to do the big interventional fertility treatment. Like, I wasn't ready to go an IVF route or anything like that. It didn't feel right. And I've had so many patients who have gone that route, and it's been wonderful for them, and it's helped them to grow their family, and that's amazing, right? Mm-hmm. But it's just such a personal decision. It's one of those things that has to feel right to everybody involved. And and it's one of those things that I've seen people, grind people under in terms of their quality of life and their hopefulness and their mental health and all of those things, right? It's very, very taxing physically, emotionally, mentally, everything. So for my husband and I, it wasn't the right decision for us. And eventually we decided to just, you know what, let's just stop, right? Like, let's make this about us again and not, focus on what we have rather than what we don't have. Because, again, he and I both have MTHFR polymorphisms. Like, I really do think that, with that first pregnancy, it was, some sort of, like, thank you, universe moment.
Yeah. Yeah, right?
But
like, right time, like, everything had to align perfectly.
Exactly. But for us, the rest of the journey just didn't line up. And we did have a number of losses, which is hard, but I feel like the harder part was making the decision to stop. Yeah. You know what I mean? I feel like that was really the part that was a challenge in terms of, coming together as a family to say, okay, maybe this isn't going to happen. You know what I mean? Maybe this isn't going to happen, and we just accept that and move on and count our blessings. And it was definitely the right decision for us. It was kind of dragging us under and putting a pressure on the relationship and us as humans that just didn't need to be there.
Well, and there's so much to that, to everything you said. Like, going through loss in any stage of a pregnancy is ridiculously hard, is not the word, because there is no word. It's one of the worst things you can experience. And I haven't personally suffered a loss, but through speaking to other guests and personal friends in my life, what you just said, like, that decision to stop is a grieving process in and of itself. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like putting the hope down.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's, well, and the hope, it's so funny. Hope is such a beautiful thing, but it can also be a really painful thing.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of choose that stopping point for yourself where you're like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's just not meant to be. Maybe it's not going to happen. And that's okay, right? Like, that's got to be okay at a certain point.
Yeah. What sort of support system did you have around you? Like, were you talking to family? Were you talking to friends? Or was this really just you and your partner?
It was really my partner and I. It wasn't something that, I'm not a person who loves sympathy.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, I feel that.
That sounds so ridiculous, but like, I just, honestly, I find the conversations around sympathy harder than I find the actual experience, for whatever reason. And so for me, this, I did have one or two friends that I would mention it to, or, even mention that I had been pregnant. It's not something that I talked about a lot, just because pregnancy losses are relatable, but also not relatable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a death in the family, right? Like people kind of have their own experience of how that goes, but very rarely do you share that experience with another person in a way that allows you to talk about it easily, I find.
Yeah. Well, everybody experiences everything differently. Everybody experiences the world differently, but especially when it comes to grief and loss, no two people are you can go through the exact same circumstance, but experience it completely differently.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It. And so yeah, it was really my partner and I, and we talk really well together. Like we have a really great communication sort of style with each other. And I feel like that for us was enough. I'm also a big journaler. Like I find that I don't necessarily know what I'm thinking until I write it down, which sounds really dumb, but is true.
No, not at all. I used to be that way. I wish I had the bandwidth to still journal, but like that, I used to do that all the time. That's how I made sense of my world.
That's exactly it. I process on paper. And so for me, that was very helpful to just put down what I was feeling, put down what I was thinking, put down, anything that was coming up for me. And then from that kind of, I could see the pattern emerging, see what was actually meaningful to me. And that was enough, right? Like, I feel like once we made the decision too, there was a tremendous amount of relief for me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really realize how much pressure I was putting on myself until I got the opportunity to take that pressure off. And also how much trepidation I had about a second child, because it's funny, like you want kids, but then it's so much to have a baby, right? It's so much. Like I remember the day that my daughter actually graduated out of her diapers, right? It was such a big day. Mm-hmm. And I remember also thinking on that day, like, I can't go back to this. I can't do it, right? Because if we had got pregnant then I would have had one out of diapers, but one in with no, like, there would have been that freedom in the middle, right?
Yeah, you had that little taste of
exactly
of independence. Yeah,
exactly. So there was definitely a right point for us where it just we needed to kind of lay that down and make the decision that this was our family moving forward.
I think that's also a topic that's not explored, I think, enough or talked about enough. Like obviously on this podcast, we talk a lot about like mental health and right. loss and birth trauma and things like that. But and there's a lot of talk about families and big families, but the decision on so many levels to just have one child. Mm. There's a stigma around that. There's a stigma for everything these days.
Oh, it's so true.
Oh my goodness. I was convinced that I was a one and done, and I ended up having two, but my kids are 7 years apart, so I had that freedom for quite a while, and now I have a 2-year-old. So,
wow,
yeah. But I wonder too if you felt any of that sort of stigma, like they're like, oh well, when are you having more? Did you ever get that question?
All the time. Yeah, when's the second one coming? From family, from friends, from casual acquaintances. Like it's a question that people feel free to ask. It's like touching the belly when you're pregnant, yes. Right? Nobody would ever do that under normal circumstances, but suddenly you get pregnant and everybody's got their hands all over you.
Yes.
It's very weird.
I don't like it.
Very weird. But yeah, there's the same thing. Like people it's kind of an accepted part of normal conversation to say like, oh, are you thinking about another one? When's the next one coming? Blah, blah, blah. And even just implied in conversation, like even if it's just in passing, people will say things about it.
Absolutely.
And it's a little, and I'm sure I've been guilty of that too, right? And not even noticed. But when it's happening to you, it definitely stands out a bit, especially when you're kind of in the middle of trying.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna point out. So it is such a normalized, like, conversational piece for parents and newlyweds, when's the baby coming?
Mm-hmm.
But you absolutely never know what those people's circumstances are. And for
Right.
you, like, you were trying, you wanted another baby, and then to make the decision, like, no, it's best for us not to. Like, I think this is a good reminder for all of us. Like, questions about people's bodies or health or procreation, those are pretty personal questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, maybe not ask when the sibling's on the way. Maybe focus on, hey, Mom, how are you? How are
Yeah.
you doing?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. My daughter, she went to a daycare program starting when she was 2.5, maybe. And it was, in a private home, and it was wonderful. Like the lady that ran the daycare was just amazing with kids. She was so, so good. And she had this group of, up to 6 kids in her home that she would do through semi-Montessori program. I loved it.
Oh,
Loved it.
awesome.
Yeah, it was great. And she had a daughter who was a few years older than my daughter. And I remember putting my foot in it with her because one day I said, like, you're so wonderful with kids. Do you ever think about having another one? And she kind of got a little bit misty-eyed and told me her fertility journey, which had been very, very difficult. And they had had a number of losses after their daughter. And, like, it just, you hate to do that to somebody and bring it up. And she was a lovely person, right? Like, I don't think she was offended necessarily. I think it was just, it's such a big topic and it can be so painful for people. Yeah, you hate to put somebody through that needlessly.
Absolutely. And me even saying that, like, I'm sure I've done it too. I'm sure, like I said, it's just such a normalized thing to say, but we really truly never know what the other person is going through. Well, so we've talked about you sort of coming into the discovery of your MTHFR polymorphism and going through that entire journey of, okay, we had our one, we would like more, we're not going to have more. Okay, you're at this point in your life. Were there any sort of resources? I'm anticipating the answer to this, but like resources for you to like find others in your position to sort of like seek solidarity?
Not at all. I actually built a resource for it because there really isn't a way for people with MTHFR to connect. And so, I started basically an MTHFR community just in a Mighty network so that people could talk about this stuff, so that they could actually compare notes, right? Because, along with the fertility stuff, there's all sorts of other symptoms and things that we experience that it just, like, where do you find this, right? And weird reactions to medications and blah, 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 all of the stuff. So I started a community called Genetic Rockstars.
Love it.
Yeah, right. That's basically for MTHFR folks who want to learn a little bit more about MTHFR. We've got a library of resources about, like, problems we might have with different medications. We have to be very careful with certain anesthetics and antidepressants and things like that. And so it's just a kind of a library of resources, but also a community of people who are experiencing some of the same things and working on their health and trying to get better and can kind of share notes with each other and kind of compare their experiences. And it's incredibly helpful. I started it, for my clients, but really
in quotation.
Exactly. Yeah. What I'm finding out is it's my favorite thing, right? Like I love getting online and connecting with these people because they're my people, right? Like, finally it's people who I'm like, oh yeah, that's happened to me. Like, here's my story, right? Tell me your story. What's going on? It's just, it's really, really helpful to have that group of people who are like, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, there's so much power in solidarity.
Yeah.
And again, like, going back to, like, you can go through the exact same experience but experience it differently. Yeah. So, but being able to to share it. It's beautiful that you created that space.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
I was going to ask too, like how has this journey affected your practice?
Very strongly. Honestly, this is mostly what I work with now, right? And it was mostly what I worked with before. I just didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been roughly, I would say since the mid 2000s that my practice has really turned in this direction and started focusing on these sort of inborn genetic variances and how we can work with those, how we can actually, utilize those to our advantage or at least work around them so that they're not causing a disadvantage. So yeah, I find it very rewarding because, it's not necessarily treating a disease or a condition. It's more like helping that person to overcome something that's been there the whole time.
Absolutely. Again, this is just like personal opinion, and listeners do with this what you will, but I have found that naturopaths and naturopathic physicians in tandem with primary care physicians, a naturopath can be your primary care physician, but you're treated so much more holistically, and you're looked at as a whole person rather than a list of symptoms.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing just in general is beautiful. Like, I think that's incredible. But then to be able to take your experience and really tailor your practice to be like, I'm going to make a difference in this area. Like, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much, Chelsea. It feels like kind of filling in a blank for a lot of people, which I love.
Yeah. I mean, I think I am absolutely not a fan of the term silver linings. I don't love the whole idea that like everything happens for a reason.
Right.
I do feel though that like some of these challenges that are put in our way really show us what we're here to do. And it kind of sounds like that's what this was for you. Even as from a child, from the time you were a child.
Yeah, very much. Very much. It feels like that to me, right? Like it feels like this has evolved so naturally as a consequence of what, my life experience has been like, that there's almost nothing else that I could do, really.
I mean, I'm sure there is, but
yeah, I mean, capable,
yeah,
but you know what I mean?
But this is what's fulfilling for you.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. I'm not even going to try to guess your daughter's age at this point because I never want to assume, but is she of an age where this is a conversation that you're having with her?
Not really yet. Although, with MTHFR, one of the things that we do have to be very conscious of is food sensitivities and food reactions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that we talk about, like she knows that if she eats dairy, her tummy's not going to feel good. She's going to get a rash. Right. And I still let her make that choice. Right. I don't want her to be the kid that goes to a birthday party and can't have ice cream or whatever. But I try to make her very aware that those choices do have consequences and that as long as she's accepting those consequences, that's okay. So that one day, if the consequences become more than she wants to deal with, she can be like, okay, well, let me revise my choices, right? I want that to be kind of a part of her knowledge growing up. There's things we're doing in the background, like she's taking an MTHFR safe multivitamin, and we limit her exposure to fortified foods, like foods that are fortified with the synthetic folic acid and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But again, at this point, she's only 9. And so I feel like those conversations will start to happen as she gets a little bit older about, hey, here's your genetics, right? Like this is how you're written. This is how you're made. And here's some things that we can do to help your body to feel its best given your genetics, right?
I don't know how you're feeling. So my oldest is about to be 9, and I don't know how you're feeling about it, but a lot of this stuff, a lot of this questions about bodies, my daughter's body and they're already coming, and I was not anticipating it being this early.
No, me neither. Me neither. I mean, the questions are I mean, there's a lot of questions, and they're very good questions.
They're very good questions. Yeah. If your daughter's anything like mine, like she's very in tune with her body.
Yeah.
And we've always been kind of open just about like, I don't know what's going to happen to her body. If you have a uterus, these are some of the things you can expect. But I would anticipate like those questions are just going to keep coming, and they're going to get a little more challenging to answer. And I was not prepared.
I don't know if anybody's ever prepared, right? Like,
yeah,
it's.
I mean, I don't remember having these conversations with my mom. I just don't.
No.
So
no, I don't either.
Especially not at 9 years old. So I love it. I love it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love that she asks both me and her dad these things. But I was like, gosh, I was like 15 or 16 before I started noticing these changes in my body. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
so,
they are really growing up fast.
Solidarity with you there. Well, and I almost refer to her as a tween, whereas like when I was a kid, tween was like 12.
12.
Like,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But no, I think of my daughter that way too.
Yeah.
And definitely I'm noticing some of the changes that I would associate with sort of tweendom, right? In
absolutely
cognitive processing, in her physical body, in all of the things.
Well, and it's interesting to me to maybe the timing of this. I honestly say I feel like every guest that I meet with them exactly when I'm supposed to meet with them. And I'm learning things exactly when I'm supposed to learn them, because there are things that you have talked about and I'm not automatically going to like, oh my God, my daughter has a MTHFR diagnosis. But there are things that you have said that she has brought up to us, like and most of the time I'm like, oh, well, honey, it's growing pains. You're growing. But she'll have these recurring pains in these certain areas. And I'm like, well, maybe we should look into that just a little bit more. Not because it could be one thing, but it could be a litany of things.
Could be anything, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a tangent and a rabbit hole, but that was just me, solidarity with you, with the 9-year-olds. And they're built different these days.
They are built different these days. Yeah, it's a brave new world. And I feel like, you know, those of us in the parenting generations are kind of running to keep up.
Yeah, it's crazy. I have you have done you obviously do this a lot because you've hit all of my bullet points so beautifully. So I think I'll sort of take us full circle. I also want to highlight that the way that you talk about it, there's a smile on your face, and I feel that there is joy in you. And that doesn't mean that you like everything that you went through and that you're happy that you went through everything. But it's to highlight to listeners that, like, whatever it is you're going through right now, there's another side. And there is joy and there will be joy. Yeah. Because I'm leeching joy off of you right now. So
awesome. Yeah,
it's beautiful and I love it. So you're at this point in your life, I think I have 2 questions and I save them until the end of a recording and I decide which one I'm going to ask. And I think the one that I'm going to ask you is, if you could go back in time, way, way, way back to, let's say you've said it and I've said it, to like 6-year-old you, and you could instill something within yourself. It could be a phrase, it could be a word, it could be a feeling, it could be a characteristic, it could be anything. Something to instill within yourself to help you navigate the journey of your life. What would you choose to instill?
I would say curiosity. Remain curious, right?
Yeah.
Because lots of people have lots of explanations for things. And lots of those explanations sound solid, written in stone, maybe, right? Like, this is what's happening, or this is not what's happening. I would say always be open to the possibility that many things can be happening at once, right? Like with the MTHFR thing, it was nowhere on my radar. This was not anything that I would have anticipated becoming important in my life or becoming kind of my professional focus or anything like that. Nor would I have anticipated how deeply it has impacted me. So I think keeping that little part of yourself open to new explanations for things that maybe other people have old explanations for is really, really important, right? Looking always for that next little bit of information. And also, God, listen to your body. Listen to your body every time,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That is so huge. Like there's so many times when I see, especially women, come to my office and say, well, here's all my lab tests. The doctor says they can't, say they can't find anything. There's nothing wrong with me, but I feel like crap. And you can see that they're so despondent and so, like they feel so invalidated by this lack of just, other people are telling them they should feel fine.
Right. Well, you're being,
don't.
Right. You're not being validated. It's a lack of validation.
Lack of validation, I guess, is the bottom line. But like, listen to your body before you listen to anybody outside of you. Your body is always more right than any authority, right? So listen to your body. If there's something that doesn't feel right, if there's something that does feel right, that is important information. Always trust that.
Yeah. And it goes hand in hand with the curiosity. Listen to your body and stay curious.
Yeah, exactly.
And it sounds like you didn't need those things instilled in you. It sounds like you had those things and you didn't.
Yeah, you're meeting me at maybe a wiser time in my life than I was having in my 20s.
You and 20-year-old you. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
20-year-old me was all over the place. So
as we all were in our 20s. Yeah, for sure. No, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I want to thank you for sharing your story. This is a topic that we have not covered. And as you say, it's incredibly relevant and prevalent in the birthing community. So, just thank you so much.
Oh, it's absolutely a pleasure, Chelsea. And I love what you're doing here. I mean, we need more people's stories, right? Especially around fertility. It's so fraught with difficulty, even for people who have, easy fertility journeys. I have learned from my patients that nobody's journey is the same. Nobody's journey is what they expect it's going to be.
Yeah.
And everybody has a story, right? So Thank you so much for gathering some of these stories and making them public, because women need to hear them.
Thank you, Amy, for sharing your experience and insight into MTHFR, fertility, and just parenting in general. It was an absolute joy getting to connect with you, and I hope that listeners who may be struggling with similar circumstances will use this as an opportunity to be more curious and listen to their bodies. Be sure to check out the show notes to find out where you can learn more about Amy and MTHFR resources. You can keep up with us on Quiet Connection by following us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at Quiet Connection Podcast. You can help our community grow by leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider sharing our episodes on social media. To share your personal journey, you can contact us through our website at quietconnectionpodcast.com or by email at quietconnectionppmh@gmail.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.